Warning! Kinda Murdery contains adult themes, explicit language, and descriptions of violence. It is not suitable for anyone, and we recommend you stop listening now.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Kinda Murdery, a true crime podcast that's mostly about murder, and always about the strange and compelling stories that arise when the path less traveled twists to darkness, and those who walk its shadows surrender to violence and corruption. I'm your host, Zevin Odelberg, and we have a perilous journey ahead, so thank you for lending me your courage and good company. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. On this day of thanks, I'd like to open with a simple statement of gratitude. I am very thankful for all of you, and for the community that we're building together. Today, I invite you to join me on a very special Thanksgiving Day edition of Kinda Murdery. I'm here to share a story of Thanksgiving murder most foul, and in case you may think that I had to work hard to find a murder story I could shoehorn into this holiday theme, I did not have to work at all. You see, Thanksgiving is the most murdery of American holidays. And I'd like to thank Philip Jett for sharing his observations on the murdery nature of Thanksgiving, which I'll share with you now. There's a link to his November 2017 CriminalElement.com article in the show notes. Here we go. Like a Norman Rockwell painting hanging prominently inside our heads, many of us cherish memories of Thanksgiving gatherings with loved ones, complemented by honey-glazed turkey and succulent desserts. A heartwarming tradition believed to have originated in 1621 by the Pilgrims, now celebrated every fourth Thursday of November since Abraham Lincoln proclaimed Thanksgiving Day a national holiday in 1863. But life is not a Rockwell painting, and the remembrances we cherish are often more glazed than the turkey that rests as the centerpiece of the holiday table. In fact, a survey compiled in 2016 found that 68% of individuals polled expected, quote, trouble during their Thanksgiving assemblage. No wonder. Reuniting with folks we rarely see, often for good reason, can evoke more dread than delight. Stresses are elevated during this time of year with deadlines, strained finances, children underfoot, and long-distance travel by plane, train, and automobile. Then we arrive at a cramped, stuffy dwelling, only to discover crying babies, coughing and complaining elders, rambunctious children, odd strangers, and renewed sibling rivalries, infused with a heavy dose of alcohol and political conversation. Worse, what family doesn't have at least one seriously troubled member that we may hope, though we don't admit it, doesn't arrive? Take one Thanksgiving gathering in Knoxville, Tennessee in 2016. Joel Michael Guy Jr. visited his parents and sisters at his parents' house that they'd recently contracted to sell. The Thanksgiving meal went well, and the sisters returned home. But Joel attacked his parents with a knife that evening, dismembered their bodies, and attempted to dissolve the body parts in chemicals before scattering the grotesque remains about the home. I wonder if that contingency was covered in the buyer's real estate contract. Another crazed family member was Paul Maragine in 2009. After finishing off a traditional Thanksgiving meal, the family gathered around a piano to sing Christmas carols. No sooner had the piano fallboard closed than Maragine shot and killed his twin sisters, one of whom was pregnant. He also killed an aunt, a 6-year-old cousin, and wounded a sister's husband. "I've been waiting 20 years to do this," Maragine confessed to Florida authorities with relief. Though the St. Valentine's Day Massacre may hold the choicest name for a holiday clash, Thanksgiving indisputably holds the top spot for death. In 2016, 600 individuals were shot over Thanksgiving, and that doesn't include the countless stabbings and beatings, many of which go unreported. Such incidents make one consider hiring moonlighting TSA employees to screen arrivals at the front door, or asking your auntie to bring her not only famous chestnut pie, but pepper spray in case things get out of hand. But not to worry, not all Thanksgiving mayhem is so grisly. Let's review what else can happen to us this Thanksgiving, short of homicide. There are the run-of-the-mill assaults and spikes in domestic violence, which some say increased more than 20% during Thanksgiving. According to the Calorie Control Council, the average American consumes 4,500 calories on Thanksgiving Day, not to mention a heck of a lot of alcohol. Then, we go outdoors with our stretched bellies to play sports or to climb rooftops to decorate. Vanderbilt University Medical Center in Nashville sees more patients for chest pain on Thanksgiving than any other day of the year. That's not surprising, since a recent study concluded that the chance of heart attack quadruples within 2 hours of devouring a large meal. And what if your grandmother's dressing has a secret ingredient, like salmonella, or other dangerous bacteria? This author still recalls grandmother's lukewarm oyster dressing in 1978. It forced most of the family into bed that Thanksgiving Day, begging for a quick and merciful death. And let's not forget those pesky stove burns and slip of the kitchen knives that send so many of us to the emergency room. If holiday death and disaster aren't enough to curdle your custard, PETA members decry the 50 million turkeys raised on factory farms that are, quote, murdered, unquote, each Thanksgiving to grace our tables. And perhaps the most bizarre trend of all is to stampede, brawl, and even kill inside the local department store to save a few bucks on an already obsolete flat-screen TV, making it indeed a Black Friday. No wonder then that funeral directors experience more stress during the holiday season than any other time of the year. But please, don't let these gloomy ruminations of mayhem spoil your Rockwell family gathering this Thanksgiving. I'm sure it will be peaceful and joyful, and if by chance it is and you live to see Monday, perhaps you should consider giving thanks once again alone. Again, special thanks to Philip Jett for sharing his thoughts on the murdery nature of Thanksgiving. Check out the link to his article in the show notes. Now, before we get started on today's main story, a quick additional word on sourcing. Today's episode is a recounting of the until recently 30-year cold case surrounding the 1989 Black Friday murder of Mandy Stavik. The following sources prove to be of particular value. The August 2021 published opinion by the Washington State Court of Appeals denying the appeal of Mandy Stavik's murderer, who I won't name here because this story is structured as a mystery, because it was one for 3 decades, and so it's too soon to be telling you the name of the monster who took Mandy's life. Also invaluable was the July 2020 CBSNews.com article by Alex Sirkin outlining just how Mandy's murder was solved, and the September 2019 ABC News article by Sean Dooley and Njoli Francis. All sources are in the show notes, and again, as I warned in the case of the severed feet, because this story is a 2-parter, the final chapter of which will be released on Sunday, November 27th, I would advise against reading the source material now, as it will spoil the whodunit. But if you're someone who prefers to know as much as possible as soon as possible, then go ahead and read away. I like you just the way you are, so you do you. And now, if you're ready, I suggest you put your personal items underneath the seat in front of you. Stow your carry-on in the overhead compartment. Let go of the cares of the day. If the tryptophan's already doing its work and it puts you to sleep in short order in the middle of this episode, I won't take it personally, but please do make sure that your seatbelt is fastened, because there's turbulence expected ahead. Kinda Murdery, Black Friday, the mysterious Thanksgiving murder of Mandy Stavik, Part 1, starts now. On a sunny Friday afternoon in June 2013, Heather Backstrom and Marilee Anderson, 2 mothers who lived near Bellingham, Washington, decided to give their young children a treat and take them to Birch Bay water slides for some splash and play. The 2 women could never have imagined the thunderous impact their small decision would have that day on their community. Backstrom and Anderson were among a group of moms chatting about their families, their lives, and their hometown of Acme, a tight-knit rural community half an hour from downtown Bellingham. Randomly, one of the mothers brought up a notorious case from years ago in Acme, the unsolved rape and murder of a beloved local young woman, 18-year-old Mandy Stavik, who, at the end of her life, on Thanksgiving Day, 1989, 24 years earlier, had been a recent graduate of Mount Baker High School. Backstrom and Anderson, who had both gone to Mount Baker High School but barely knew each other at that point, started chatting as their kids frolicked on the water slides. Backstrom suddenly blurted out, "I know who killed her." Anderson, stunned at the statement, then replied, "I do too." Mutually intrigued, the 2 women told each other stories about their encounters with a local man around the time of Stavik's murder. Were the women simply gossiping, sharing a lurid conspiracy theory, seeing a pattern where none existed? Absolutely not. As it turned out, The simple and unplanned sharing of terrified experiences that each woman had had with the same Acme, Washington man would eventually lead authorities to solve Mandy Stavik's murder in 2019, a case that had gone cold for 30 years, until those two mothers, Backstrom and Anderson, decided to take their kids to the water slides. We'll begin with Murdery Anderson's story. Anderson told Heather Backstrom about another Mount Baker graduate, a man who was a friend of her husband, who had stopped by her house one night a couple years after Stavik's death and knocked on the door. He said he'd been out hunting and needed to use the phone. Anderson was home with her infant son. The man dialed the phone, but Murdery could hear the beep, beep, beep of the call not going through, and she suspected that he was not dialing a working number and had lied about needing to make a call. So, then he walked through the kitchen and back to my bedroom, Anderson recalled, and he said that he used to drive by our house and that he'd always been in love with me, and he wanted to make love to me. At that moment, she was seized with fear. Her husband was away. She was alone with a man she suddenly saw as a predator. I kept telling him no, but he kept trying to convince me to go into the bedroom with him. Finally, I told him I would call the police, and somehow, I don't even remember exactly how, I got him out of my house. Hearing this story, Backstrom exclaimed that she too had a very uncomfortable experience with the same man just months before Mandy Stavik's murder. She'd been only 15 at the time, and the man was 21. It was after a softball game, and they were riding in a truck driven by another young man named Dan, who Heather Backstrom later married. At the time, though, they were just friends. Heather sat between Dan, the driver, and the man in the front seat. The man started flirting aggressively with her. He would talk about my eyes and say they were beautiful. Then he took a pen out of the cup holder and he would start rubbing it along my knees, said Backstrom. She says she was very uneasy, but she just played along, knowing that Dan's presence would prevent him from getting any more physical. But the incident always stuck out in her memory, and in the small community, she made a point of trying to avoid contact with that man. The two women for years had thought that if he behaved toward them in this predatory way, it was conceivable that he could have done the same thing to other women, maybe even Mandy Stavik. But they had nothing more concrete than their own suspicions, and never named him to the police. I really wasn't ready because we're in a small town, and to accuse someone of something if we don't know for sure, it's a little scary, Anderson said. But here in the water park, more than 2 decades later, bolstered by a similar tale from her new acquaintance, Anderson knew it was time to speak up. She contacted a high school classmate who was a detective with the Whatcom Sheriff's Office and told him of their suspicions about this man. What happened from there is a twisty tale of clever and relentless investigation by local authorities. A dedicated prosecutor who came out of retirement to take on the case he'd started so many years ago, and the enterprising help of a local woman named Kim Wagner, who provided police with a crucial piece of evidence that finally cracked this seemingly unsolvable case. I want to do the right thing for Mandy, Wagner said. Her actions, and the pursuit of the case by so many others in the community, finally led to a measure of closure for Mandy Stavik's mother, Mary, and the rest of the family. I absolutely did not think this case would ever get solved, said Mary Stavik, Mandy's mother. Yes, Mandy's murder was finally solved in 2019, for which, on this Thanksgiving Day, Kinda Murdery joins the chorus of Mandy's friends and family in giving thanks. Because, remember, until Heather Backstrom and Murdery Anderson unwittingly cracked the case by sharing stories at the water park and then providing a name to local law enforcement that would unravel 3 decades of mystery, Mandy's murder had gone unsolved for 30 long years. And so that is where we'll begin, 33 years ago today, Thanksgiving, 1989. In November of 1989, 18-year-old Amanda Stavik, a freshman at Central Washington University, returned home to rural Whatcom County with her college roommate Yoko to celebrate Thanksgiving with her family. Stavik and Yoko caught a ride home with Stavik's former boyfriend Rick Zender, a student at the same college. Zender dropped Stavik and Yoko at home around 2 p.m. on Wednesday, November 22, 1989. Later that afternoon, Stavik visited friends at her former high school during the girls' basketball team practice. On Thanksgiving Day, Thursday, November 23, 1989, Stavik spent the entire day at home with her family. She did not leave the house that day. On Black Friday, November 24, 1989, Stavik spent the morning hanging out and eating leftovers with her family and taking a walk with Yoko. She made plans to go with Yoko out that evening with a high school friend, Brad Gorham, and his friend, Tom Bass. Sometime between 2 and 3 p.m., Stavik decided to go for a run with the family dog, Kira. According to Mary, Stavik's mother, she usually ran west from the house on Strand Road, crossed Highway 9, and continued until she reached the South Fork of the Nooksack River, and then ran back the same route, a 5-mile round trip. This path took Stavik past Tom Bass's house located on Strand Road just east of the river. While there was conflicting evidence as to the route Stavik ran that day, her brother Lee, who was playing with a friend at a neighboring home, and another eyewitness, David Cracker, both saw Stavik running east on Strand Road toward her home around 3 p.m. Cracker said Stavik was within minutes of her house. When Lee returned home, however, neither Stavik nor the dog were there. Mary, her mother, growing concerned, began calling neighbors and Stavik's friends to see if anyone had seen her. Lee and Mary went out and looked for her on the road, but were unable to find her. Not long after, the dog, Kira, returned home without Stavik. The dog cowered with tail tucked and had river silt covering part of her hindquarters. Gorham, Tom Bass, and Zender showed up to help look for Stavik when they heard of her disappearance. Around 5:30 p.m., Mary called the police, and the Whatcom County Search and Rescue and Alan Pratt, a human tracker, responded and began a widespread search for Stavik. Pratt found a disturbed spot on the shoulder of the road near the corner close to Stavik's house. There were several footfalls, possibly from 2 people, which looked like somebody had been walking or wrestling around or something. The nearby grass also showed signs of disturbance. There was river silt in a nearby ditch, similar to that found on the dog. On Monday, November 27, 1989, law enforcement found Stavik's naked body in the shallow, slow-moving water of the Nooksack River significantly upstream from where she was last seen on Strand Road. Investigators found footfalls and tire tracks in a nearby field known as the Homestead, a local isolated hangout for teenagers, but they were unable to determine if these were related to the crime because of the number of people who had been there. They found no other tracks or signs of disturbance near the riverbank where they found Stavik's body. Ultimately, no crime scene was ever located, and investigators were unable to conclude where Stavik went into the river. Stavik was naked except for her running shoes, and her body was covered in scratches on her legs, buttocks, and arms. There were more scratches on the front and sides of her legs than on the backs of them. Many of the scratches were parallel, indicating she was in motion when she was scratched, and the overall condition of the scratches suggested that they occurred while she was alive. Whatcom County Medical Examiner Dr. Gary Goldfogel opined that these scratches were consistent with someone running through brush such as the blackberry bushes found along the riverbank where her body was discovered. Dr. Goldfogel performed an autopsy on November 28, 1989. The autopsy indicated no defensive injuries to her hands, no foreign DNA under her fingernails, and no evidence of strangulation or evidence suggesting she had been bound in any way. There was, however, blunt force trauma injury to Stavik's right forehead. Dr. Goldfogel testified that the blow to Stavik's head would have caused a significant concussion, but he could not say she necessarily lost consciousness. Dr. Goldfogel opined that the injury happened immediately before or after her death because, quote, by the time her heart stops and the blood pools, these things don't occur. Dr. Goldfogel concluded that the cause of death was freshwater drowning. Based on her stomach contents, he estimated she died within 3 to 4 hours of her last meal. Stavik's family testified she last ate before she went walking with her roommate between 11:30 a.m. and 12:30 p.m. on the day she disappeared. The evidence thus suggested she died between 3:30 and 4:30 p.m. on Friday afternoon. During the autopsy, Dr. Goldfogel found semen in Stavik's vagina and, based on the sperm count, concluded sexual intercourse had occurred no more than 12 hours before her death. This evidence led the state to conclude that someone had kidnapped and raped Stavik while she was out on her Friday afternoon run, and that she had died while fleeing her captor. Dr. Goldfogel preserved the samples he collected and sent them to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Washington State Patrol Crime Lab for analysis. The crime lab developed a male DNA profile from the sperm. The police investigation led to several suspects whom they later excluded when their DNA did not match the DNA in the sperm sample. Eventually, the case went cold. 20 years later, in 2009, Detective Kevin Bauhay reopened the investigation and began asking for DNA samples from anyone who lived in the area or who may have had contact with Stavik near the time of her death. Over the course of the investigation, Bauhay and his team collected more than 80 DNA samples for testing. In 2013, Detective Bauhay asked one man in particular for a DNA sample. This was the same man whose predatory behavior Backstrom and Anderson had discussed at the water park. When police traveled to his home and asked him about Mandy Stavik, he appeared to be unable to remember her name. That was definitely a red flag for me, which indicated that he was obviously lying, said Bauhe. Everyone knew what the Mandy Stavik case was and that she ran by his house every day. How would he not know it? Acme Sheriff Bill Elfo said that this lie made the man shoot to the top of the suspect list. And if you'd like to find out exactly who that top suspect was, please join me here on Sunday, November 27th for Black Friday, the mysterious Thanksgiving murder of Mandy Stavik, Part 2. And now, please don't go anywhere because I'd like to share. First off, I'll remind you, as I always do, of the free 3-digit lifeline number 988 that you can call to receive immediate counseling for substance use, mental health, and suicidal thoughts. So, if you're in acute crisis, please do call 988. Program it into your phone. If you're not in acute crisis and you would just like to connect with someone, please don't hesitate to reach out to me, kindamurdery@gmail.com. I'm here, I care, and I'd love to connect with you. Also, please do remember that the world is a much better place with you in it. Secondly, as you know, I have cerebral palsy, which is a neuromuscular disorder. And I mention my disability because I want Kinda Murdery to be a community where disabled people, physical or otherwise, and not just disabled people, but really anyone who is struggling, can all feel comfortable sharing their stories. I want us to share life experience because usually when it comes to life experience that's different than our own, most of us have never even considered another person's daily reality. But once exposed to those stories, that experience, the people who are living it become real people to us, and it's my hope that we can all build empathy for each other that way. And so if you have a story to share, an experience to relate, I encourage you to do it. I thank you ahead of time for your courage, and I assure you that when you share, you'll not only be sharing for yourself, but the fact that you share will help other people to have the courage to share as well. So you'll be helping all of us. And to that end, I recently received an email from a listener named Lily in Sweden that really moved me, and I'd like to share that with you now. Lily writes, "Hello there. I've just started to listen to your podcast, and I really love it. I've noticed you say many times that you care about people. I don't suffer from the same thing that you do, but I do have many mental diagnoses like bipolar, severe personality disorder, and also severe anxiety. I feel that I have to battle with this every day, every minute. Also, it's not many people I tell this to, but I actually have a doctorate degree in forensic psychology. But after that, my mental health started to fall down. I didn't work too long as a forensic psychologist here in Sweden due to the fact that there are hardly any jobs to find here. So now my mental health is kinda shitty, to be honest. Sorry for swearing. That's okay, Lily, I swear all the time. But I'm trying to be strong. But it's not that easy sometimes, Lily says. Today would be my dad's birthday if he were alive. He died 13 years ago, and it still feels shitty, to be honest. He was my everything, my best friend, and he died when he was only 58 years old. I suffer from bipolar 2, severe personality disorder, severe anxiety, and also PTSD and some schizophrenia as well. I've not had an easy life. After Mom and Dad divorced, my dad married a woman who was really nasty to me and my little sister. There was mental and physical abuse almost daily, so it's no wonder I've turned out like this. And also, when I had my first boyfriend, he wasn't nice to me either. It was much mental and physical abuse there too. Actually, to be honest, every guy that I seemed to find in my life treated me very badly. Until now. The guy I'm with now, my fiancé, is really treating me right. I think all of us deserve someone who treats us right. I have a wonderful fiancé that supports me all the time. But it's okay with me if you want to share my story on the podcast, because if I can help someone, it will all be worth it. Anyways, I just wanted to say hello and say you're doing awesome work with your podcast. I really love your soothing voice. It makes me calm. Keep doing awesome work. Best regards, Lily from Southern Sweden." Lily, thank you so much for reaching out. You're very brave to open up to the Kinda Murdery community, and I really appreciate the example you set, helping to normalize mental health challenges and let other people know that it's okay to be open about what they're going through. accepting who we are and the difficulties we face is the only way we can heal. And yes, it is scary to share because it always feels like people will judge us or think that we are somehow less than because we're not, quote unquote, normal. But that's not what we do here, and that's certainly not how I feel, how we feel. No one who struggles with mental health or physical disability is less than, is broken. In fact, you are so strong, you are so brave. Every day you face demons, challenges that most of us can't even imagine, and you persevere, and you have the courage to be your own person and to share that person with all of us. And we appreciate it so much. So thank you, Lily. Thank you for your courage. All right, everyone. Remember, we're in the middle of a murder mystery here, so if you want to find out who the top suspect is for the murder of Mandy Stavik, please do join me again this Sunday, November 27th, for Black Friday, the mysterious Thanksgiving murder of Mandy Stavik, Part 2. Oh, and also, if you enjoy the show, if you feel like it helps you get through your day, helps you face some of the challenges you face, or if you just like the stories, please do take a moment and leave a 5-star review wherever you listen. Every bit of engagement helps so much, and I really do appreciate it. All right, I look forward to seeing you all on Sunday. Happy Thanksgiving. I am absolutely so thankful for all of you, and I am also Zevin Odelberg, and this has been Kinda Murdery.